I'd been in boot camp a while, and because George and I always work hard, and here's where the thing about it, where the Japanese comes in. You know, it's amazing. I think the Japanese picked the wrong time to pick on America, because every one of us boys that joined the service, and the girls too, we were born under the worst conditions. We were born during the Depression. We were raised without anything. In that period of time until I joined the Navy, I had learned respect. I'd learned to say no, sir, yes, ma'am. I learned to respect my elders, and I learned to be resourceful. I learned to do with what I have, and if I didn't have what I needed, I made it. I created it, and as an entrepreneur, I learned how to be, as I said, I guess, depend on myself and not on others. And so I said, I think that the Japanese made a mistake because they were picking out people that actually had been training for war their whole life, only they didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
Because our lives, the way we lived it, was very much like boot camp, is where you learn to say yes, sir, and no, sir, respect your authority. And so we were ready-made for war. And so I never heard anybody say that, but that was my analogy after I'd gotten a little bit older. So it was about 2 months, two weeks from the end of boot camp. And I left out a part. I have to go back here to remind me where I'm at, because I have to tell you something else. Right after the war started, there was several months there that I didn't get to go into the service. So one night I was laying in bed, and we lived on Rosemead Boulevard at that time. We were beginning to come out of the Depression at that time. And I was laying in bed, and the whole house started shaking. And I thought, my God, what is that? We do get earthquakes. I thought it was the beginning of a big earthquake. So I jumped out of bed and ran out the front door. And there, coming down Rosemead Boulevard, was a caravan of Army vehicles, personnel carriers, big trucks, tanks on low flatbed trailers that they could tow, and everything there that looked like that you needed to fight a war. And all of a sudden, it began to hit me, the magnitude of what was going on. A lot of people didn't know that Rosemead Boulevard was a military highway. It came from the desert all the way straight down till it got to the go-around in Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could go to San Pedro or go all the way around the other side and go to Camp Pendleton, San Diego. And these convoys would just go down and go around, never have to stop.
Yeah.
The other way. Anyway, I looked at this caravan, and I used to sit on my front porch at night till like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was never ending, just truck after truck after truck. You could smell the diesel, you could feel the vibration and the excitement. And I looked at these guys, they're all in olive drab, and they're sitting in these personnel carriers, squeezed together with their backpacks, their all their gear, their rifles, and in the front of the convoy, there's a jeep with some brass officers sitting there, very rigid, flying the American flag
Mm-hmm.
and a company banner, and they're just a minute.
So you were talking. You said to remind you about being in boot camp before you told us about this parade, because that sounds pretty incredible.
Well, one thing I want to say about these personnel, it was the first part of the war. We were losing thousands of men, and I just had no idea about that. But I was looking at all these people, and I had no idea that their lives and my life would be intertwined.
Yeah.
Not that same group, but men like that and me would be part of together because I would be in charge of guys like that later on, even though I was only a petty officer. So anyway, I got called out, and they told me that I was needed in an office. So I left the barracks, went to this office, walked in, and there's some high-ranking officers there. There were two of them and a couple of yeomen. I walked in, I saluted, and I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Linscott?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "We'd like to know if you would like to volunteer for Special Forces hazardous duty." And I said, "Yes." In my thoughts, I thought, I shouldn't have said that. I never volunteered for, but I wanted to get out of boot camp up there. It was cold and miserable. So
Yeah.
anyway, I said, yes, I would. He says, well, you come in second in your strength group in the boot camp, because I was very strong.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't big, but I was strong. So the next morning, I was on a train headed for San Diego. And I went down there for extensive gunnery training and become a striker for gunner's mate. And after I finished that training, they sent me to San Francisco. And I found out in the interim that what I was training for was to be an armed guard gunner's mate. And the gunner's mates were the gunner's mates aboard the merchant ships. Because when the war broke out, we had a dilemma. We had a war in the Pacific, and Germany, right after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, Germany had declared war on the United States at the same time, about 5 days later.
Mm-hmm.
So we were fighting two wars on both sides of the earth, and we didn't want the war on our land. So it was imperative that they take everything needed to conduct a war and get it overseas into their territory. So that required ships. We had no planes at that time that we could fly that many people over. Now you can fly 300 or 400 people over. But we didn't then, and it depended on ships. So they got Henry Kaiser to build all these ships, Liberty ships and Victory ships. And they were made in a hurry. They weren't made to last a long time. Hopefully they'd last 5 years, and then you'd have to junk them. They wouldn't be any good after that. And they were riveted together in the beginning. And they were built all up and down the West Coast and East Coast. And then Henry Kaiser was a very brilliant man. He started prefabbing the boats, making parts for the boat all over the United States, and then shipping the parts to where they could be put together.
Mm-hmm.
And San Francisco and Oakland area was where a lot of them were put together. San Francisco was the hub of activity for the West Coast. All the ports were busy sending Liberty ships overseas. Every berth of every port was full of them. There never was an empty space. You might come from overseas, coming back with some troops, or to pick up a load, and there was no room to get into a dock, even a side tie. So you'd have to drop the hook and wait your turn. But they built about 3,500 of them, and all 3,500 of them were in business every day, hauling millions of people overseas. Now the war in the Pacific was an amphibious war, and the war in Europe was a land war. So over there they went overland through one country after another. In the Pacific, it was all island hopping, which meant you had to make the amphibious landings through the Higgin boats, the LCVPs, and all those. So that's where the Navy and the Marines worked together.
Mm-hmm.
That was my job. I don't know how much, because you want to talk about some of the things that happened later on in life. So you want me to rush through it? Or?
Well, why don't you give us a couple of the highlights, because I know I can come back and do a complete World War II history show with you. But, I think what you went through pre- and post-war and during the war made you who you are today. And that's the person that I knew was an incredible entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit more about the war. I know there was a couple big highlights, and we can talk about post-war.
Okay. First of all, or secondary, part of my conversation about the armed guard, we lost. We had the highest casualty rate of any branch of the service. But all of our service and all of our efforts and everything that we did was thankless. Not that we did it for thanks, but I guess it's always nice to be appreciated. But the Merchant Marine and the Armed Guard, what they did for this country, if you look on the internet, look up the Armed Guard Pacific, you'll find that the experts say that we shortened the war by 10, 20 years.
Wow.
What we did. But because we lost thousands and thousands of men, we lost the men before they ever got over there to fight because the ships were sunk. We always lost 4 or 5 ships every convoy. And because of that, all of our history is buried back in the archives in Washington, D.C. But that's what I did for the first 2 years I was in. To get away from the war a while, let me talk about when I got out of the service, how I met my wife and our family.
I did want to ask you, I'm sorry because I know your history. There's a couple, I don't want to call them highlights, but, as being part of the Pacific Campaign, you guys rescued POWs.
Yeah, well, that's not, I was in 3 different parts of the world. I was when I left the Pacific for 2 years, I went into the Atlantic and fought the Battle of the North Atlantic. I shipped out of the Brooklyn Navy Yard with a group called a Hunter Killer Group. We were anti-submarine warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the wintertime in the Atlantic. And I became a tin can sailor. We're known as tin can sailors. And to give you an idea, a little Navy slogan that you don't hear very often, I'll give you one example. We'd been in a horrible storm. The ship was taking water over the flying bridge. We were dressed in our jungle cloth clothes, which were like coveralls, and boots, gloves, helmets, face masks, and then on top of that, you wear foul weather gear. On top of that, you were just almost walking around like zombies. So my watch that night was going to be from the mid to 4, which is 2400 to 4:0400 in the morning. And to go on to watch, you go down into the mess, you drink some Jamaican sidearms, and you check up on any scuttlebutt that's going on. And then before you go outside, you put on your variable density glasses, which has a little knob in the front. You can switch from dark to light. You turn it to extreme dark. And then you have to go through a curtained off area just before you get to the outside hatch. And you stand inside this little area, all of you guys, and we stand there together. You can't see anything. It's totally dark. But you're getting accustomed to the dark. If you go out on the deck, you couldn't see anything. Also, they're called blackout curtains, so no light from the ship will go outside. So we stand there for a few minutes. We're ready to go outside. You take 2 of us to open the hatch because the wind's blowing so hard.
Mm-hmm.
The wind's blowing probably 100 miles an hour, and the ocean, the rain and the storm is blowing horizontally right in your face. And it's just absolutely the most miserable experience. You say, well, if this was peacetime, we wouldn't have to do this. But there's a war going on. And you don't stop a game for rain or storm.
That's right.
You have to do it anyway. So probably reminds you of what it was like in Iceland.
Maybe.
So only maybe more so. I don't know. So we go outside, and then there's a line hooked to there's a railing along the side of the ship. There's a line hooked to that. So you grab the line, and the quarter deck is only about like 3 feet wide, and then the ocean is right here. And that's in water because you're rolling, and so you're standing in water on the quarter deck. And you have to make it forward. So you grab that line and you go hand over hand and don't let loose or you're gone.